Okay, thank you for joining us in the last session for the Identity Access Management Capsule Training course. In the first session, we discussed the security architecture and what are the benefits of architecture for your organization and for your security blueprint. When we discussed the IAAA, identification, authentication, authorization, and accounting, we covered the authentication architecture and authentication factors, and the strong authentication, which we call it as 2FA or multi-factor FA. Then in session number 2, we covered the identity access management definitions, and we highlight the important characteristics for the IAM, as we mentioned the automation and the components of the IAM, which are the authentication, authorization, user management, and the respiratory, and we highlight some other characteristics, important characteristics for each one of them, as the single sign-on and other important factors. As we mentioned, this is just for your information and to refresh your minds that the factors, the topic, it's a very long, the 3 hours, it will not be enough to cover all the information. But our main objective of this capsule training courses, and this is the reason behind the name capsule training course, that we want to give you a quick idea and information about some specific topics, when you will know how we are working, and if you require more information about these things, it will be easy to search for it. Now you know exactly what you want. If you need identity access management, you have to think about authentication, authorization, accounting, user management, password, and we covered all these concepts. Now we will come to a very important topic, which is the federation services. Federation services. What is the federation service? Federation service, gentlemen, this is a very important service, and it will make life very easy for security administrators and for users as well. This is a trust relationship. It is a trust relationship between two entities. For example, suppose that you have company number 1 here, and you have company number 2, and here company number 3. Now, if you want a user, there is one user here, and this user, he is working in these 3 companies together. And he wants to access resources from all these locations. Of course, he must have 3 username and passwords, right? 3 users credential, one for company 1, one for company 2, one for company 3. Okay, we can understand this, but this is not easy, especially if he have another a company 4 or maybe 5, and he need to access all these, then it will be very easy. Then what is the concept? The concept that you will have the only username and password, one username and password in one of these companies. Let's say that his main company, it will be company number 1. Then instead of have a different credential in each location, no, this is not the scenario. Then what is the scenario? The scenario, let's say that this user, he is based in company number 1 here. He is based here, this user number 1. User number 1 trust, or company number 1 trust company number 2, trust company number 3. As you can see, all the companies are trusting each other. Then if he have a username and password in company number 1, there is no need to create a username and password for him in company 2 and company 3 to access resources in these companies. Then how he can access it without authentication? No, he will be authenticated, but using the username and password of this user from company number 1. Then the same username and password which he is using in his company, it can be used to authenticate him for other companies or maybe other services as Google or whatever, as we will see it. Okay, look, let's have a look here. This is a good example, and it will explain you how the federation operation works. User, he want to access a website. He type www.google.com. Okay, he want to access google.com, or when the website, it will ask him, what is, please authenticate yourself. What is your username and password? He will provide the username and password. My username is username, my password is so and so. Okay. But as we mentioned, gentlemen, as we mentioned, now this user, as you can see, he is in one company here. This is the user company. And he has a data center, and this data center we have Active Directory. And the username and password, it is created here in one of the servers here. Then what will happen? When the website, it receives the user credential, it does not know anything about this user. This user, I know that he is in company XYZ, for example. When it will send the username and password to the Active Directory for our authentication server in this company, and it will ask him, is username and password right? The Active Directory, it will check, and it will say, yes, it's right. Then if it's right, it will say, yes, it's authenticated and authorized. If he's authorized to use it, then after it will be authorized, he will use the service. Then look here, this is what we call it federation. Now you don't need to have username and password in each and every server, or not server, I mean site or company which you want to access it. It is only one username and password, one set of credentials. It will be hosted in the server, and this what we call it the federation. Federation, this means that you must have a trust relationship. You must have a trust relationship, as you can see here. Here, you must have a trust relationship between this website and the location where the data it's already hosted in the data center. Okay, for the federation, we have two protocols, my friends. We have two different protocols, two main protocols, popular protocols which it can be used for federation in the market. First one, it is SAML. I am quite sure that you heard about this. It's anyway, SAML, this is the open standard protocol. It's open standard protocol, and it is used for the authentication. It has different components. What are the SAML components? As you can see here, the user, this is the user, the one who want to authenticate. Then you have the identity provider. Identity provider, this is the entity which it has the username and passwords. It may be your organization, and it can be hosted on the Active Directory. For example, it can be hosted on the Active Directory, and you will have here the service provider. This is service provider. It is the entity which it will provide you the service which you want to access. It may be a website, it may be a server, it may be a service, it may be email server, whatever the server it is. And finally, the SAML assertion, and this SAML assertion, we will cover it in the next few slides. Then these are the components of the SAML components, and this it will be used for authentication. This is standard protocol. This, you know, gentlemen, when we speak about the architecture, and we said that the architecture, it will help you to understand how the components can communicate together. Then now, if you know that your Active Directory it supports SAML, then if you want to request or require an application or service or whatever, then it will be very easy to communicate with your vendor and ask him, I have an Active Directory and I want to enable the SAML protocol for the authentication with a different website. Is it supported or not? And so okay. As we mentioned, these are the SAML components, and the SAML it will help you to authenticate yourself, and this you will have username or credentials, user credential in a centralized location. It may be your company. It may be your company. Then, if you are this is your company and you are hosted here, and you have, for example, other company you want to access resources, or maybe, for example, SaaS, you may have a SaaS service, cloud service, or it may be another company, XYZ company, and this user want to access the resources on the different website or on the different company. He can authenticate through the username and password hosted in his company. But as we mentioned, that there must be a trust relationship, and this trust relationship it should be. Sorry, I think I faced a problem. You will be able to see the screen within a few seconds. These are the components of the SAML as we mentioned. You have the user, you have the identity manager, and finally you have the service provider. These are components, and these are popular components which you have to know about them in the SAML. This is standard. These are standard. You have to know these components very well. These are standard, and you have you must know it very well. The user, the identity provider who is providing the credential information. You have the service provider who is providing the service, and this is a protocol which it will be used for authentication. These are the SAML components which we discussed right now. Now the SAML assertion, which we spoke about it. What is the SAML assertion? SAML assertions, gentlemen, it's considered as XML document. XML document. It identifies that the provider sends to the service provider that contains the user authentication. This is considered as a token or a document. This token or document, it has the information about the permissions which are allowed for the users. This, it will contain the permissions or the authorizations which it will be assigned for the users. And this, it has the three types of assertion for authentication. Of course, you must be authenticated, attribute, and authorization decision. Attribute, this is based on specific attributes. As we mentioned, it may be your company name, your location, your email, maybe X500 customized field, whatever. Okay, when the assertion, you have to understand that this is a document which it will define the authorization permission for the users. SAML operations, it will be exactly the same as we mentioned. User try to access the data on a website. Then the website, it will ask him for the authentication. When the user provide the credential, it will be sent to the identity here. Here, look, gentlemen, this is what we can call it now. Now we are understanding the concept. This, it is the identity provider. This identity provider. Why? Because it have a list of the credentials, right? This is the identity provider. and this is the service provider. This is the service provider, because this is the website which you want to access. These are the components of the SAML, and this is the user. This is the user. Okay. ADFS, Active Directory Federation Service, it is exactly the same as SAML, gentlemen. There is no difference, but ADFS, it is developed by Microsoft. It is only used for Microsoft. This is the difference. With SAML, it's open protocol. You remember in the first slide, let me show it to you again to refresh your mind. Here we mentioned it is open standard. Open standard. It can be used in any application. If you are a developer, you can use it. You don't need to pay anything. This, it's open. Anyone, he can use it in their application, no problem at all. But for the ADFS, no, this is defined by Microsoft, developed by Microsoft, and Microsoft, we can use it only. What are the components of ADFS components? If you can remember the SAML components, we mentioned the user, the identity provider, the service provider, and assertion or SAML assertion. We have here the ADFS components almost the same. As you can see here, we have the user, and this user, he requested the authentication. Then we have the ADFS server. This it is similar to the identity provider. The identity provider, which is consists of the user's credential. Then you have here the service, and this service, it consists of the service, which is similar to the what we say it, the service provider. When this is service provider, and here the Active Directory server, Active Directory server. Sorry, gentlemen, this ADFS, no, I made a mistake here. Let me clarify it for you. Sorry. This is not the identity provider. This is the identity provider. This is the identity provider. This server is the identity provider. This one, which I make it highlighted very grounded. And this identity provider, and the one which I will hide it in blue, the one which I highlighted in blue is the what we can say, the service provider. The one which is highlighted in blue, it is the service provider. Okay, this is the user. This is the user. Then what is ADFS? This is a different component than the what we have in the Active Directory. This is a different component than the one which you have in the Active Directory. All the other components are the same. All the other components are the same. But the user, we know it. The one it's in blue, it is the service provider, and one in black is the identity provider. ADFS, this it will be the server which it will receive the connection. And if you have any company here and you have a user, as you can see here, you have a user, and this user want to access this website, then here it will ask him for username and password. Then he will send the username and password. When this server, it will send username and password, it will not send to the identity provider, because I don't want this server to have direct access to the internet. And it will send only the information for other server, which is called the ADFS server. ADFS server, it has nothing. It is just a server. It will receive the connection from any server from outside, and it will send it into the Active Directory. When the Active Directory, it authenticates the server and say yes, it's authenticated, or it's not authenticated, to allow the user the access. Okay, Now we have, as we mentioned, we have the SAML and we have the ADFS for the federation protocols, and these are very popular in the market, very popular. ADFS, anyone who is working with Active Directory and Microsoft, usually we are using ADFS, and this is very popular. And if you are using Linux, Unix, then you will find the SAML, and even there are some applications working under Windows. Again, Windows and Microsoft products, we are supporting the SAML as well. We have other federation protocols. We have other 3 federation protocols. I will just go through them very quickly to have an idea about them. The first one, which is called the OpenID protocol. OpenID protocol, it will be used for authentication process. It will be used for authentication process, only authentication, not authorization. It is not authorization, my friends, it's only authentication. Then it will be used for authentication, and it is similar to SAML, exactly the same as SAML, but there is only one difference. What is this difference? That the identity provider, the server, which it consists of the user credential, it is a third-party identity provider. It is provided from a third party. It is not provided from the organization. It is not provided by your organization. For example, I have a organization here, and I want to access some services. Instead of creating Active Directory and administration, servers, data replication, redundancy, I will say that I will communicate with Google, and whatever any accounts the user are created on Google, I will use it. Then if there is any user want to access any service here, you have to send it to Google to be authenticated, and if it is authenticated, then he will be able to access the service. Then this is the only difference between the OpenID protocol and SAML, where the identity provider is a third-party provider. OAuth or OAuth, authentication protocol, it is used for authorization. It is used only for authorization. The last protocol, it is OpenID Connect. Look here, this the OpenID protocol and OpenID Connect. These are 2 different protocols. OpenID protocol, it is used for authentication. Authentication used for authorization only. OpenID Connect will be used for authentication and authorization. Then it will support authentication and authorization in the identity access management. These are the reference information. If you want to have more information about these things, you will find here security architecture, you will find security pillars, you will find the IEEE, the IAM. These are the additional information if you want to go through it. And I will send you all this slide on WhatsApp. I will send you this slide on WhatsApp, then you will be able to access the information. This slide, I will send it to you by WhatsApp, then you will be able to access these information. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions, my friends? Do you have any questions? No.
For Oracle integration?
Sorry?
Which protocol type we can use for with Oracle application?
SAML. SAML, this is the standard. When you will ask this question and you are hesitating about the answer, then SAML it is a standard. If it's related to Microsoft, then it will be ADFS. But usually for Oracle, we are using SAML.
Type for what is the difference between SAML and OpenID and OpenConnect? They're all only different protocol?
No, as we mentioned, I mentioned this in the last slides, but I will repeat it again. For the SAML, the OpenID, it has the identity provider as a third party. as we mentioned, that all the credentials are stored on a third-party server. It may be Google, it may be Hotmail, or whatever it is. It is a third-party provider. But in the SAML, no, it is local, inside the company. It will be hosted inside the company. For OpenID Connect, it will be support authentication and authorization. By the way, OpenID support authentication only, but OpenID Connect support authentication and authorization. Or authorization, it support authorization only. And by the way, from my point of view, I may be right or I may be wrong, but this is from my experience. It's not something standard. From my experience, I don't think that it's OpenID and authentication. These are, I don't want to say old protocols, but they are not used right now. The standard protocols, which are really used right now at this moment, it is SAML. SAML is considered the standard. Even Microsoft, although they have the ADFS, but in some of their products, they are trying to support it because it's considered as open protocol and it will allow you to connect to, if you are asking as architecture engineer and would say, okay, I want to make sure how the authentication it will be done. Because, for example, I have Active Directory or I have Unix or Linux. I want to make sure that this application will support the blueprint which I have in my company. Then we are saying SAML. When you will hear SAML, you will stop because SAML, it will be standard, identity access management, service provider, all of them are working. Or it may be Active Directory, you will have the ADFS, and this it will be the standard for Microsoft products, I mean. For the persons who are saying that they missed some of the sessions, I know that there may be a problem with your internet connection. I'm really sorry for that. But as we agreed that these sessions, it will be loaded into the internet. YouTube, you can access it on the YouTube. You can subscribe in our channel and you will find all the videos which are recorded. You can access it at any time.